Liam Cooper, age 45, knelt at the southern fence line of his land, one gloved hand wrapped around barbed wire, the other balancing a rusted nail against wood. He had mended that same post 3 times in 10 years, but tonight it leaned again, wearied like him. The sun had long slipped behind the hills, casting the clouds in copper and sorrow. A hawk's cry cut through the hush, and Liam stood to stretch his back when something white fluttered in his periphery. At first, he thought it was a lost linen or perhaps a wedding veil caught by the wind, but it moved too jaggedly, too human. He squinted into the distance where the path curved near the dry creek bed, and there, dragging herself across the mud with trembling arms, was a woman in a wedding dress, barefoot, her hair soaked, her body broken. Liam did not hesitate. He mounted his horse like a man with no time left to waste. By the time he reached her, she was half collapsed in a puddle, eyes open but empty, as though she had left herself behind somewhere miles back. The dress was shredded at the hem, bodice stained dark. Blood or rain, he didn't ask. Her feet were cut, toes curled in pain. Her lips trembled. She didn't flinch when he dismounted, didn't speak when he crouched beside her. Her voice, if she had one, was locked in her throat. "I got you," he said, and it was not loud. It was a promise. Liam gathered her into his arms like she weighed nothing at all. Her body was fever-warm and trembling. Her breath shuddered as she clutched the front of his coat, not from recognition, but instinct, like a deer in winter seeking heat in the last dying light. Inside the old ranch house, he set her down gently on the cot near the stove. The fire was already crackling. He brought a basin, wet a cloth, and began to clean the dirt from her forehead. She blinked once. That was all. He didn't ask her name. He didn't ask what had happened. A man who's buried his own share of stories knows better than to dig too fast. Instead, he laid a dry wool blanket over her, poured a cup of peppermint tea, and placed it within reach, then stepped back, silent as snowfall. The wind banged against the shutters. Somewhere outside, the windmill creaked its tired lullaby. She fell asleep with her hand still gripping his coat sleeve. The town of Merrow Creek would murmur about it within a day. The bride in white, found wandering the wilds. Some said she had been left at the altar. Others said she had struck her groom. Olivia Grace, daughter of a preacher's widow, was to marry one of the wealthiest ranchers in the county, and she vanished before the vows. No one mentioned the bruise above her cheekbone, or the gash near her ribs, or that the man meant to marry her was twice her age, with a temper known to snap bones like kindling. But Liam didn't listen to town gossip, and Olivia didn't offer her version. Not yet. She awoke 3 times that first night, each time startled, wild-eyed. Each time she found a lantern lit in the corner, and Liam sitting across the room in a chair, reading an old worn Bible without speaking. When she whimpered, he looked up, just once, and nodded softly, like she didn't have to explain the dream to be believed. By morning, the rain had cleared, leaving the world wet and gold and unsure of itself. Olivia sat up slowly, every part of her stiff. The wedding dress clung to her in places it shouldn't. She looked around the small guest room. Simple, quiet, clean. No signs of a woman. No photograph. Just the smell of cedar and soap and ash. She stood, legs quivering, and opened the door to the hallway. At the end, the kitchen. The smell of eggs and coffee. Liam stood with his back to her, frying pan in hand, a red checkered cloth tucked into his belt. She didn't speak, just leaned against the wall, catching her breath. "Hungry?" he asked without turning. Olivia swallowed hard. "I don't know. You will be. Sit if you like." She did. Slowly. Every motion of hers was guarded, like she still expected someone to slap her for breathing wrong. She stared at her hands on the table, dirt beneath her fingernails, a wedding band on the floor beside the hearth. She'd taken it off in her sleep. He placed a plate in front of her. Scrambled eggs, 2 slices of bread, a jar of honey in the center of the table. "I ain't got much, but it's clean." She nodded. Her voice hadn't come back yet. He didn't press. She ate in silence, chewing slowly, tears stinging her eyes not from pain, but from the way it felt to be left alone, in peace. For the next 3 days she said almost nothing, but she started washing her hands, brushing her hair. She found an old dress folded in a linen trunk, soft blue cotton, someone else's once. It fit her loosely. On the 4th day she stepped outside. Liam was chopping wood by the barn. When she walked across the porch, he paused. "You ain't healed yet," he said. "I'm not staying in bed." He nodded. "I can bring a chair out if you want." She sat beside the chopping stump, knees tucked to her chest. After a long while, she whispered, "I never liked weddings." He didn't laugh, just said, "Not all of them are good." She looked down at her bare feet, now bandaged and cleaner. "My mother said girls don't get to choose. They just pray the man is kind." Liam placed another log on the block and split it with a hard, clean strike. Kindness shouldn't need to be luck. They sat together until the shadows grew long. That night, she found a folded quilt at the foot of her bed, a new bar of soap beside the wash basin, a wooden comb still warm from someone's pocket. The silence in the house began to shift, not heavy, but holding. On the 6th morning, she asked, "What happened to your wife?" Liam didn't look up from the porch railing he was sanding. "Pneumonia. Long time ago." "You live alone?" He nodded. "Most days, I don't mind it." She hesitated. "Do you mind me?" "No." "Why not?" He wiped his hands on a cloth. "Because you ain't trying to lie about anything. You're just trying to breathe." Olivia turned toward the sunrise, face softening. The silence between them stretched, then settled like dust on old floorboards. That evening, when Liam went to close the barn doors, he found Olivia there. She was standing by the horse stall, touching the mane of his old mare. "I used to ride when I was a girl," she murmured, "before everything became expected." He watched her with quiet eyes. "You still can. Nothing's stopping you here." Olivia looked over her shoulder. Her lip quivered, but she didn't cry. Outside, the wind began to pick up again. A distant rumble of thunder rolled in the distance. She glanced down at her own hands, wrapped in soft cloth, and whispered, "I don't even know who I am without that dress, without being somebody's bride." Liam leaned against the barn beam. "Then don't be a bride." She looked at him. "Be Olivia. Just Olivia. That's enough." She didn't answer, just turned and pressed her forehead to the mare's neck, breathing deep. A moment passed, then another. Then, in the darkness of that barn, where hay dust danced like gold in the light of his lantern, Olivia said something she hadn't meant to say out loud. "I didn't want to die, but I didn't want to go back either." Liam didn't move closer. He just said, "Then stay." The thunder cracked sharp across the plain. Her eyes widened, not at the sound, but at the quiet offer beneath it. And somewhere deep in her ribs, where the fear had lived for too long, something else stirred for the first time in years. It wasn't safety. It was the slow, terrifying flicker of wanting to live again. The days didn't announce themselves in that house. They unfolded gently, in soft firelight and the smell of coffee rising before the sun. Olivia Grace, no longer in her wedding dress, no longer quite the girl who'd stumbled through Liam Cooper's gate, moved through the rooms like someone relearning how to be seen. The blue dress she wore now was simple, a little loose at the shoulders, but it didn't carry anyone else's name. It didn't carry shame. The house itself never said her name aloud, and neither did Liam. Not because he'd forgotten it, but because he seemed to understand there was a difference between silence and avoidance. His silence was something else, like the hush of snow just before dawn, thick with meaning and heavy with respect. He didn't prod her for the past, didn't try to write a future either. He simply made space for her in the now. She began to notice the small ways he had let the years pass without disturbing too much. A woman's apron still hung behind the pantry door, sun-faded and folded over itself. A porcelain cup with a painted blue rose sat untouched at the back of the cupboard, and near the back of the house, beside the garden window, A rocker creaked faintly when the wind blew through the cracks. Olivia asked about none of it. She didn't need to. What struck her was that he had not tried to replace anything. Some men, when widowed, tried to rebuild what they'd lost, found younger women, bought newer dishes, painted over memories with louder colors. But Liam had simply kept living, kept tending the porch, kept feeding the chickens, kept breathing. And now she was here, watching the same wind through the same windows, breathing the same air. In the evenings, he cooked supper, always plain, always steady, cornbread and beans, fried potatoes. On occasion, he offered venison. She always said thank you, and he always nodded like she'd given him more than words. One morning, she found him in the garden behind the barn, staring at what used to be rows of flowers now strangled by weeds. He stood there as if the garden had said something he couldn't quite answer. She approached carefully. Used to be someone's? Liam nodded. Hers. Olivia knelt and pulled the first weed from the hard-packed soil. It came up with a soft snap. Would it be all right if I tried to bring it back? He looked at her with that same calm expression he always wore. Wouldn't mind it. So she worked. The soil was unforgiving at first, dried and stubborn. But Olivia dug and tended, whispering to the stems like they were children who'd been left alone too long. She didn't know all the names, but she remembered enough from her mother's garden. Marigold, bluebells, thyme. She planted some with seeds she'd found in the cellar. Others she nursed back from the edge. By the second week, her hands were blistered, nails ragged. But something inside her softened. She no longer flinched at footsteps behind her, no longer jumped when the wind slammed the shed door shut. She slept without waking up in cold sweat. Most nights, the townsfolk, of course, were not silent. At the general store, Olivia heard them long before they saw her. She just showed up, wearing white, and now she's living on Cooper's land like a widow who forgot the body. I heard she seduced him. Heard she cried until he took her in. She ain't even ashamed. Olivia's grip on the sack of flour tightened. She turned before they saw her, left the eggs behind. That evening, she didn't come down for supper. Liam knocked on her door once but didn't enter. The next morning, he found the wedding dress laid neatly in the fire pit behind the barn. She stood nearby, arms folded. "You sure?" he asked. "I want it gone." He didn't ask why. Together, they watched it burn. It didn't scream like she thought it would. It curled quietly into ash, just another piece of fabric that had never really fit her skin. When the fire went out, Liam handed her a folded shawl. "It's cold out." She took it, and something passed between them. Not a beginning, not a promise, but a recognition. By the third week, they found a rhythm. She fixed the curtains in the parlor. He mended the fence. She baked bread once. It turned out like stone. He still ate it. Said it reminded him of trail rations. She laughed so hard she cried. The porch became their meeting place. After supper, after chores, they sat there while the sun collapsed behind the hills. Sometimes she asked him questions about horses or his childhood in Missouri. Other times they said nothing at all. One evening, she pointed to the stars just blooming over the horizon. "When I was little, I used to count them until I fell asleep." Liam looked up, arms crossed. "You believe they're angels?" She shook her head. "No, just promises no one kept." He nodded like that made sense. The next morning, she found a folded paper on the table. A crude drawing, stars arranged in shape. At the bottom, he'd written the names of constellations. She pressed the paper to her chest and didn't speak for an hour. But not all things stayed quiet. One afternoon, a rider came up the path. Olivia saw him through the kitchen window and went still. The man wore a fine coat, slick hair, a crooked smile. She knew that face, knew the way it bent toward cruelty just beneath the charm. His name was Elias Green, her brother's business partner, and the man she'd been forced to agree to marry. He dismounted like he owned the land, like no door could stay closed to him. Olivia met him on the porch, heart thundering. "Well," Elias said, removing his hat, "Ain't this a picture?" She said nothing. "You got folks worried, Olivia. Word is you ran off half mad. Your brother's out looking high and low." "I'm not lost," she said. "You ran out on a man who paid good coin for a wedding," he said, stepping closer. "That ain't just scandal. That's theft." Liam stepped out behind her then, quiet but solid, like stone grown from the porch itself. "She's not property," he said. "And she ain't going anywhere with you." Elias chuckled. "Didn't take you for a white knight, Cooper. Thought you liked your ghosts quiet." "I don't care what you thought," Liam said. "You can leave now." For a long second, no one breathed. The wind tugged at Olivia's skirt. Her hands were fists at her sides. Elias tipped his hat and smirked. "This ain't the end." He mounted and rode off. Olivia turned to go inside, but Liam spoke softly. "You all right?" She nodded barely. Not scared of him, just sick of being something men claim. Liam looked at her then, not with pity, not even with concern, but with respect. "You're not." That night she sat beside the fireplace, eyes fixed on the flickering flames. Liam poured tea. She sipped slowly. "He said my brother's looking for me." "You don't have to see him," Liam replied. "I know." A beat passed. "Do you think I'm weak?" Liam met her gaze. "No. I think you've had to carry too much alone." She set her cup down, hand trembling. "I never asked to be rescued." He nodded. "You weren't." Their eyes met across the room. The fire snapped, a log fell. "I'm just glad," he added, "you walked through my gate." For the first time, her lip trembled, not from fear, but from some strange swelling deep inside, a grief that softened into something lighter. Later that night, she walked into the guest room and pulled back the curtain. Outside, the garden glowed under starlight, rows of new life pushing through dirt. She stood there, her breath fogging the glass, and then she whispered her own name, not to anyone in particular, not for permission, just to hear it aloud again. She slept peacefully for the first time in years, but at sunrise, a shadow loomed on the ridge. Another rider, and this time he wore a badge. The first time Olivia stepped back into town, it was not with pride, nor with fear, but with the quiet resolve of someone who no longer wished to be hidden. Her blue dress was modest and pressed, her boots borrowed from Liam and too big by a half size, but she walked straight down the middle of Main Street with her spine lifted like someone who had learned, at last, not to flinch. Liam walked beside her. He didn't take her arm, didn't guide her like a protector or property. He simply walked a half step behind, letting the space between them say, "She decides where she goes now." It was market day. Dust hung like smoke over the streets, and the awnings of the general store flapped gently in the wind. Children played with stick horses near the trough, and women carried baskets of eggs and gossip. The moment Olivia stepped into view, silence fell, not sharp but subtle, like the sudden pause of a fiddle string mid-song. Then came the whispers. "Well, look what the dirt blew back." "That's her? Thought she'd be prettier. She ain't even trying to hide. Lord, she's still living out there? With him." She was always trouble, even when she sat in the front pew. Olivia heard it all, every syllable, but she kept walking. Her gaze stayed ahead, where the post office leaned slightly like an old man waiting for rest, where the feed store sign creaked overhead. She did not look at the faces. She did not run. Inside the store, the air was thick with sawdust and tobacco. Liam picked up a tin of coffee and a bag of nails. Olivia ran her fingers over a row of combs, then picked up a spool of thread the same shade as the wildflowers blooming behind the barn. When they reached the counter, Mr. Harrow, the shopkeeper, hesitated a second too long before nodding to her. "You doing all right, miss?" "I'm healing," she said softly. He nodded again, awkward. "That'll be $1.35. Liam pulled a few coins from his pocket, set them down. When they turned to leave, a voice rose from the doorway. "Well, I'll be, if it ain't the runaway bride come to bless us with her company." It was Sheriff Eli Gaines. Olivia turned slowly. He was lean, silver star pinned sharp to his vest, a pistol at his hip. He liked to rest his hand on like a preacher with a holy book. His mouth was wide and smirking, his eyes scanning Olivia like a thing he'd once owned. Liam stepped closer, his shoulders calm. Olivia's voice didn't waver. "I'm not a bride." "Well," the sheriff said, scratching his jaw, "you sure ain't a wife either. You just in between." Someone behind them chuckled. "I ain't here to cause trouble," she said. "No, but trouble tends to follow you, don't it?" He smiled as though it were a joke between old friends. Liam didn't raise his voice, didn't reach for anything. He simply said, "We'll be on our way." Eli nodded. "Sure you will. Just don't forget, this town don't take kindly to unfinished stories. Folks like closure." They left in silence, but Olivia could feel the heat rising up her throat. Back at the ranch, she didn't speak for an hour. Not during supper, not during dishes. She sat on the porch as night fell, arms wrapped around herself. Liam joined her eventually, handed her a mug of tea, and didn't ask. "They think I'm something shameful," she said at last. "Like I broke the rules just by surviving." He took a long breath. "You didn't survive to please them." She looked at him. "Then why does it still hurt?" "Because you still want them to see you as more than they chose to." The wind brushed her hair across her cheek. She tucked it behind her ear. "I thought I was ready to face them," she whispered. "You did," he replied. "You walked in. You walked out." They laughed. "They laughed first. That don't mean they'll laugh last." She studied him a long moment. "You always been this quiet." "Only since I learned not all things need fixing." A few nights later, Olivia brought the piano stool into the front room. The keys were dusty. A few stuck, but she played what she remembered. Slow, aching tunes from her mother's hymn book, each note trailing like smoke. Liam listened from the hallway, arms folded, head bowed. After the song, he said, "That one, my wife used to play that one." Olivia looked down. "I'm sorry." "No," he said, stepping closer. "It don't hurt. Not when it's you." From then on, music became their language. No declaration, no sudden romance, just melodies shared in silence, in harmony. When she played, he'd clean his rifle or polish his boots or sit still, letting the song fill the spaces that used to ache. And still, the town talk. At the church social, Olivia offered to help bake. 3 women turned their backs on her at once. One murmured, "Sourdough don't fix a spoiled girl." At the well, she passed by a group of children whispering behind their hands. She began to feel the weight again, not just of shame, but of never being let forget. One evening, she stood in front of the barn, eyes scanning the sky. "I don't belong anywhere." Liam stood behind her. "You belong right here. I mean in the world." "I know what you mean." She turned. "Why are you kind to me?" His face stayed steady. "Because you deserve it." She pressed her lips together. "You don't even know what I did." He stepped closer. "Don't need to. I see who you are now." Olivia looked down at her hands. "I used to think if I followed all the rules I'd be loved. Then I broke one, and the whole town saw me as dirt. Then maybe the rules are wrong." She smiled barely. "You ever think about leaving?" Liam nodded. "When my wife passed, I thought about selling the land, going back east. But I stayed." "Why?" He looked out toward the hills. "Because this house holds my ghost. And now it holds someone who breathes." The next day, the town hosted a harvest gathering. Everyone came. Farmers, merchants, school teachers, the mayor. Olivia stood in front of the mirror, hands shaking. She wore yellow, not white, not blue. A soft yellow dress she'd sewn herself from a roll of fabric Liam found in the attic. She turned to him before they left. "Do I look all right?" He looked at her for a long moment. "You look like the season turned in your favor." At the gathering, they walked in side by side. All eyes followed. Conversations paused. Laughter dimmed. But no one spoke. Olivia stood taller than she ever had in that town. She shook hands with the mayor's wife, thanked the baker for the bread, complimented the schoolteacher's brooch. Some women nodded politely. Others turned away. But they couldn't ignore her. Not anymore. And then, in the middle of the crowd, Elias appeared again. Glass of cider in one hand, toothpick in his mouth. He sauntered over, eyes glinting. "Didn't think you had it in you," he said, sipping. "Showing your face here. Wearing sunshine like it forgives you." "I don't need forgiveness from you," Olivia replied. He chuckled. "Girl like you should know the difference between surviving and being welcome." "I know I'm not welcome to you," she said. "But I ain't here for you." Elias leaned in. "Your brother's on his way. Brought papers this time. Says you're not fit to choose where you live." Olivia's heart stopped. Liam stepped forward. "She lives here. That's all that matters." Elias smirked. "Law might see it different." And with that, he walked off. Olivia stood frozen. "He's bluffing," Liam said. "Your brother can't own you." "He thinks he can," she whispered. That night, back at the ranch, Olivia didn't sleep. She walked the halls barefoot, touching the doorframes, the walls, the windows, marking the house as her own. In the kitchen, she found Liam sitting at the table, tea in hand. "He's coming," she said. "I know. I don't want to run." "You don't have to. But I can't be dragged back either." "You won't." She sat beside him. "What if they force me?" Liam set his cup down. "Then we stop waiting." Her voice trembled. "For what?" "For permission to call this home." In the stillness of that moment, with the lamp glowing gold between them and the floor creaking beneath time-worn feet, something clicked into place. Not romance. Not safety. Claim. She would no longer apologize for living. But in the distance, beyond the hills, 4 riders approached at dusk, and one of them carried a warrant. The morning they arrived, the sky was the color of old tin, dull and heavy, as if the clouds had forgotten how to move. Olivia stood at the window with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. She'd woken before first light, the way frightened animals do, sensing the shift in the wind. Liam hadn't spoken much since the gathering. He'd sharpened tools in the barn, straightened the fence posts, oiled the hinges on the front gate. Not out of fear, but out of ritual. A man preparing a house not for war, but for truth. By the time she saw them cresting the ridge, 4 riders, steady and deliberate, Olivia was already at the door. "They're here," she said. Liam didn't look up from where he sat lacing his boot. "I know." The lead horse carried Sheriff Eli Gaines, star glinting like judgment. Beside him, her brother Jedediah, thick-necked, jaw-tight, coat too clean for a man who'd ever plowed soil. Behind them rode Elias Green, smirking beneath his wide-brimmed hat, and a 4th man holding a folded paper. They didn't gallop. They didn't shout. They simply came like a fact. Olivia stepped off the porch as they dismounted. Her feet were planted firm. Her heart was loud in her chest but didn't shake her voice. "You don't belong here," she said. Jed snorted. "That's rich, coming from the one who ran like a coward." "I left because you tried to sell me." He shrugged. "I arranged a marriage. You disgraced us. You bruised my ribs. That was your doing. You don't get to rewrite what happened just because you ended up on some backwater porch." Liam stepped beside her then, his presence like a gate closing gently. "That's enough." Eli unfolded the paper. "We got a legal writ here, Cooper, signed by a circuit judge. This girl, Olivia Grace, was under guardianship when she fled. Her brother's name is on the land she was meant to marry into. That makes her absconding property." "She's not property," Liam said quietly. "She's a person, and she doesn't want to go." Jed gestured sharply. "You got no claim on her." "I don't need claim," Liam replied. "I got her word, and she's got mine." Eli raised his brows. "That ain't legal binding." Liam folded his arms. "Then go ahead. Try and take her." Olivia's breath caught. Eli hesitated. Elias, behind him, reached for his revolver. Liam didn't move. "You planning to shoot us over a girl?" Elias sneered. "No," Liam said, voice even. "But I'm not gonna let her be dragged like a thief. And if you're set on breaking into my house, well, I figure you won't mind if I remind you that trespassing ends poorly out here." The tension snapped taut. Then Olivia stepped forward. "I'll tell the judge myself. I'm not under anyone's care. I was coerced. I never consented. I won't be shamed into a marriage I never chose." Jed growled. "You always thought you were better." "No," Olivia said. "I just started thinking I was worth something." Liam glanced at her, just briefly. It was the first time she'd said it aloud. Eli narrowed his eyes. "We'll be back. This ain't over." "No," Olivia replied. "It's just beginning." They turned and rode off, not in defeat but in frustration. And it didn't matter, because the sky began to clear, a shaft of light breaking through the clouds, and Olivia realized her legs weren't trembling. That night she found Liam in the barn, running his hands along the bridle of his mare. He didn't turn as she entered. "I didn't know you'd stand like that," she said. "I didn't know I needed to." She stepped closer. "I never asked for rescue." "You didn't." I didn't want to be alone." He nodded. "Neither did I." She looked at him, at the way his hands stilled against the horse's mane. "Why haven't you ever asked me to leave?" she whispered. "Because you've never been a guest. Just someone coming home slow." The barn was quiet. Outside, the wind stirred the trees. Olivia moved to the cradle tucked behind the haystack. She hadn't noticed it before. Rocking gently on its own. "Did you have children?" she asked. Liam's voice was low. "Once. A boy. Didn't last through the winter." Olivia traced the wood with trembling fingers. "I thought I'd be a mother by now," she murmured. "But I never got past being sold." "You weren't born to be bought," he said. She turned. "Then what am I?" Liam looked at her, and in his eyes she saw not pity, but reflection. A man who'd lost, a woman who'd been lost, and the flicker of something in between. "You're someone learning how to live," he said. She didn't speak. She just crossed the barn in 4 slow steps and placed her forehead against his chest. He didn't move at first, then lifted one hand to rest gently on her back. Not hunger, not lust, just shelter. She cried into his shirt and didn't apologize. Later, on the porch, they sat watching the stars. The yellow dress she wore billowed in the breeze. His hand rested near hers, not touching, but close enough to feel. "I think the town will always talk," she said. "They always do. I don't want to be their story." "Then write your own." She looked at him. Would you have married again?" He was quiet for a long while. Then, "I wasn't looking for love. But I wasn't looking for you either." Their hands touched, just fingertip. She didn't pull away. The next morning, a preacher arrived, not summoned, just passing through. Said he'd heard whispers and wanted to see with his own eyes what kind of woman had stirred up so much silence. Olivia offered him tea. Liam offered him shade. The preacher said nothing at first, just watched them. Then, "You married?" Liam said, "No. Planning to." Olivia looked to Liam. He met her eyes. "We might be," she said. The preacher nodded. "Then say the word. I'll marry you right here, with the porch and the wind as your witnesses." Olivia felt her heart thud. Liam said nothing. The preacher set down his bag. "You don't have to rush. I'll be in town through sundown." When he left, Olivia turned to Liam. "You weren't looking for love," she said again. "I wasn't. Are you now?" He looked at her, and for once she saw the bare truth beneath his quiet. "No," he said. "But I think love found me anyway." She didn't cry. She just reached for his hand, and he didn't let go.